Danny O'Dwyer is the creative force behind Noclip, a Patreon-funded video production company that specialises in some of the best video game documentaries around. Combining the personal stories that developers have always wanted to tell and unprecedented access, Noclip has been setting and exceeding the bar for crowd-funded video content for almost 5 years. Before Noclip, Danny worked for GameSpot, originally in the UK before moving to San Francisco. A long way from his roots in Waterford, Ireland, Danny shot to the forefront of a new wave of video-based personalities with his plucky Irish charm, wit, and dedication to telling stories about games. I've been a fan of Danny since his days making The Point, an opinion show for GameSpot in the vein of Charlie Brooker, a mutual hero of ours. As Noclip finds itself having just received its biggest injection of funding since its launch, I sat down with Danny to chat about the future of Noclip, his entry into the industry, and where he sees his place in it now. Danny O'Dwyer, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Jordan? Thanks so much for chatting to me.
Thanks for chatting to us. When it comes to talking to people that have done the Patreon thing and gotten out of the mainstream kind of loop of games coverage, you are like the top of the list to talk to, so having this happen so quickly is fantastic. I think the first thing we need to talk about is Noclip's 2021. How has that been? If we'd done this conversation like a month ago, it feels like it would be totally different.
Yeah, it would have been a lot of like dreams about what I wish we could do, and now it's kind of what we can do. We had our sort of best ever funding drive. We, got probably 40% growth on our Patreon, which for a small team that runs as close to the budget as we do is monumental. It means that there's more hours for the rest of the team. Means we can tackle basically twice as many projects with the editing pipeline. So it's fantastic. We're chewing through edits at the moment. We've more coming out than ever before, and we're also sort of being a little bit more dangerous with the types of projects we take on because we have that extra flexibility now. That's
great. I mean, I saw when you were putting up the posts about what Noclip was going to become and the kind of relaunch as a patron, I was like, great, love it. I increased my patronage. But then when I saw you on Twitter being like, this is going crazy, this is so much more, this is so many more new patrons than we've had in X amount of time. What do you think the catalyst for that was? And I know you said that a lot of old patrons came back. What do you think made them decide to do it now?
I feel like you can probably answer this more than me almost, right? Because as somebody who supports our work, you understand why you do it. So to understand that, you have to understand why people don't as well. I think there's just an inherent, Patreon in and of itself is a barrier to entry, right? People really need to be sort of convinced to put their credit card on anything, rightfully so, especially these days with so much uncertainty in terms of the job market and everything else. But I think perhaps the reason we had this sort of overflow of support, I think it's two things. I think, quite frankly, our video that we put up on YouTube scared the crap out of people, which was not intentional. I wasn't trying to. I think it sort of was a bit more foreboding. Like, I think the thumbnail was like, what happens next? Or, the future of Noclip, which immediately looks like, oh, we're shutting down, we've been bought out, or there's going to be ads on everything. I don't know. So people watched the video. We had really high retention on the video, which was a big part of it. And then I think we don't often ask, like we have a, bumper on the front of the videos that is sort of our staple that says the name of the company. And then, now it has this little splash screen that says, join us. And then once the video starts, that's, it's all about the game we're talking about. We don't overload the videos with reminders of people to support our work. And we're, happy to do that because we want these videos to be as clean as possible. So in 20 years time, when people watch them, they retain their context, right? So I think just coming out and asking for a lot of viewers for the first time in years reminds them, and when they have that, when a moment like that happens, when suddenly lots of people are joining and lots of people, that you can feel the momentum and the movement. I think as humans we want to affect the world, and I think when you see that it's happening, then your patronage feels like it's stronger, and in a way it is, right? Having that immediate growth in such a small period of time. I'm constantly future thinking. It's like a problem I have. I'm always like planning things, and I didn't have plans for what happened. So it took like a week and a half for me to figure out exactly what this meant for us on a medium to long-term basis.
And do you think you have that now? Is the roadmap a bit clearer, or is it still kind of seeing where the dust settles, because you obviously don't know if this is like one big spike and then it'll return to kind of where it was, or if suddenly it's just going to be like this over and over again and you're going to have like 10 offices. You're going to buy a mall like Epic did.
God, I hope not. Could you imagine? What would I do then? My job would just be,
just you and Jeremy running around this mall with those scooters. Like one half of it's an edit bay and the other half of it's like a shooting situation. Obviously, it's you and Jeremy that have done the majority of the stuff. You've got Frank as well working with you guys. Is that something that you think that was like top of the list in terms of getting more people involved? Because I've heard you on other podcasts saying that you want to grow to like a 4 or 5 man team. Like, is that something that's a bit more realistic now?
Yeah, I think like 4 or 5 people would like ideally be where I'd like to see it at like year 10 or something, but I don't think we're there quite yet. Especially when it comes to the sort of, so much of this hinges on my ability to be on top of the work that we're doing, and a growth spike like that would, I think, rattle me. And at the moment, I'm a bit of a linchpin for the whole thing because I do basically all the external comms and I edit 90% of the docs, right? So I think over years, I would prefer to get better at delegating and get, find my niche. And ideally, I think like I'm just really lucky to be in this position, and I would like to bring up other voices, right? Because Patreon's really tricky. It's a type of thing where good ideas sometimes don't get funded, and sometimes bad ideas, but with people who have known internet audiences might actually do pretty well, right? So I think I was in a lucky position where we had a good idea, and also I had like a decent audience coming from my time at GameSpot and jumping in on stuff like Giant Bomb over the years. So it kind of all worked, right? So I think that's kind of what I'd ideally like. But honestly, the number one thing to do was to give the rest of the team a bit more stability in the amount of hours and time we could do. 4.5 years of Jeremy and me working together, and to be able to like have him have a more skin in the game creatively is really cool. He does a bunch of freelancing. He's the type of guy who doesn't really want a 9 to 5. He, goes out adventuring, and his RV got nicked last week. But before it got nicked,
getting cars stolen. Honestly,
I know. I had my car stolen last summer as well. It's just the East Bay, man, here in Oakland, California. It's rough out there. Lock up your car, put chains on it. He left GameSpot because he didn't want to be held down that way. Our working relationship at Noclip really works because we have on weeks and off weeks, right? We have like busy editing and shoot periods, and then it goes quiet for a while. So that's how it worked. But I think after 4.5 years, you start to like, this is the gig that he enjoys the most, I think, and it's the gig that is most creatively satisfying for him. So to be able to expand and give him more stability and more work is really cool. And then Frank as well has been doing our community stuff for 2 years. We just need more community stuff. Like we have, that's been something I've been not very good at doing for the past 4 years. And I think we have a real opportunity to harvest a great little community over here. So those were the sort of main things. And I think generally where we're going, I have a way better idea. It's like a cone. It's like I can see which, it's not all the way closed yet, but I can see kind of where we should be. And yeah, I sort of have a new baseline I want to aim for. It used to always be stay over 4,000 patrons, and now it's stay over 6. So we'll see how that goes. Time will tell.
It felt like it was due. Like every time you said on the kind of the patron only shows that things were like on a level and on flat, it never really made sense to me because the stuff just kept getting better. So it seemed like this was going to happen at some point, but for it to all happen at once, it must just be. I can't imagine what your email inbox has been like over that time, because you get the wee notification when someone joins your Patreon.
It's a nightmare.
Going wild.
It's a beautiful nightmare. It's great. You get, but yeah, and Patreon broke for the first 4 hours of it, so I didn't get any of them. And then in the space of 10 minutes, I got like whatever it was, 1,000 of those little pings. We actually sent out a secret video to the 8,000 people who used to be patrons. So, the 8,000 people who over the course, it's 4.5 years. So it's actually not that many, but we have pretty high retention where, our folks are incredibly loyal. But it was just kind of like it was like, yeah, of course I am asking for you to come back. That's why the video is about. But like, first of all, let's talk for like 6 minutes about how we really appreciate that you gave to us and that we never get to talk to you, because like we have a pipeline for YouTube audience and we have a pipeline for current patrons, right? We do our patron show, but we didn't, I never like, there's no way for me to, eloquently reach out to people who used to fund us. And they're like really important because they kept the wheel spinning for years and years and years. So it was cool. We got to put up like a fun video, and then we had like one of the most interesting YouTube comment sections ever on that video, because it was a bunch of people who had like reasons why they left. So we just hashed it out, and it was like, it was really interesting. It was everything from like, you know, oh, you know, we had kids and we didn't, you know, and then this happened, and you know, and it's awful in a way, because it's like you don't have to give excuses. Like it's you owe us nothing. But it was a really like honest, you know, between that and like people angry because I said something on Twitter, or, you know, so it was cool, because I was just like open about everything, and we all chew it out, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, it's been a wild couple of weeks of emails and DMs and comment sections, and just reacting to the various ways in which people want to reach out. And like I said, we're a small team, so you know, there's only one of me kind of holding all the gears on this end for that stuff. So it's been a lot, but it's been good. It filled me with confidence rather than trepidation. And I think when I launched Noclip, I felt a lot of expectation, and now it feels more positive, more uplifting.
Noclip's obviously a huge success, but I want to go back to the Citizen Game days. I want to go back all the way back to you on YouTube running about in what I presume is your back garden, dressed up with AK-47s and putting that stuff on YouTube.
Oh my God.
I just wanted to get your kind of experience of breaking in to the UK games press at that time, because obviously it's changed in the kind of the span of time that you've been in it, but the mechanics for someone that doesn't live in the kind of London bubble making it big aren't that different. So what was your kind of experience back then?
Yeah, it was probably similar to a lot of people on the British Isles who want to break in, where it's kind of, you know, pack your bags and head to London town. So I grew up in the southeast of Ireland. I think that was literally the first video I ever put up on YouTube. That was for a PC Gamer Alienware PC competition.
Oh, really?
Which we won. So
fantastic.
There's screenshots of that video in a PC Gamer, which I have like. I remember buying two, or I bought one copies, and an ex-girlfriend of mine bought another one, and then I ended up spilling, I don't know how, but I ended up spilling milk all over the first one. So thankfully she had the
celebrating just pints of milk over the top of it.
Irish people are crazy, man. We just drink milk all day. I'm from the southeast of Ireland, a little town called Waterford, but I was in Cork, and I've been making websites since I was like 14, and I had like a little company in my hometown, and I love making websites. I thought that was what I was going to do forever, but I wanted to work in games after I watched all the GameSpot people in the US actually over here, you know, on the spot, and like what would have been like Jeff Gerstmann and all those dudes before they did Giant Bomb. And I knew that there was this one dude called Justin Calvert, who was a British dude who worked in the San Francisco office. So I was like, okay, so he figured out a way to get there. So I've backwards sort of, I think I talked to Justin. He's like a mate of mine now. It's really weird. And realized that how he did it was basically he worked for GameSpot UK, and I was also a fan of theirs. It was like this back in the day of, you know, Guy Cocker would have been the editor my whole time I was there too, but he would have been sort of front and center there. Alex Sassoon Kobe, a lot of those folks. And I knew he made the transition that way because it's kind of tricky to get an American visa. So I applied for a job. I almost got it while I was in Cork. They flew me over for an interview. They hired someone else. I think that person lasted 3 weeks and was a bit of a weirdo or something, so they got rid of him.
In this line of work, I can't believe it.
I know, yeah. What are the odds? Applied to a load of jobs at GameSpot UK, never got them. Applied for a web development position at CVG, which I was really underqualified for, so I rightly didn't get that. And also I think I dodged a bullet there. I had some friends who worked in that office, and not sure it was the best spot maybe. I think I was 2 weeks away from moving to Dubai with my then girlfriend, and I got an email from GameSpot saying we have a position. So I was like,
so come buy a PlayStation Portable today. Sure, it costs a month's wages, but if the games are bollocks, you can always watch porn on the bus.
I didn't really know anyone in London. I had a bunch of friends on the GameSpot UK like forums, or I guess just the GameSpot forums, and they just so happened to be in England or in Britain, because one of the guys was in Wales, in Swansea, a guy called Mark, and I didn't know where any of these people were. And then one of them was a dude called Tamor. I didn't know that was his name. His name on the GameSpot forums was like some anime reference. It was like Orichimaru Sama or something. I had no idea. So I posted a blog saying or something I was going to London, and then he was like, I'm in London. He ends up living like one tube stop away from me. I lived in Stratford and he was up in Leytonstone. So, you know, went to meet, didn't know anything about him, and then he came up, invited him over I invited him over for drinks or something, and like Timur is a practicing Muslim, so he's never touched a drink in his life. So he's like, he'd never seen an open drink in his life. And I'm like this Irish guy in London, so like what my main hobby is probably going out and getting smashed, right? So we had there would have been no way for us to really meet or be friends, I think, outside of the context of the fact that we both really love games and we both had like a desire to maybe work in the press. So that's how me and Tam kind of got together. And Citizen Game was basically a CV. It was like a way for a bunch of us who kind of had dreams about working in the games industry to get published work somewhere, because this is like kind of pre-YouTube or early YouTube, but like I don't know, Tumblr or like Medium blogs or anything, right? So if you wanted things on the internet, you had to have a website, and I was a web developer, so I just built us a website, and then we started this thing, and the thing it had like a small passionate audience, but didn't get that much traffic or anything. But it was a place where everyone could point. And over the years, a bunch of them got work. Timur was one of the first ones. He worked at CVG, and then a couple of other places, GameSpot UK. Now he's one of the head honchos over here. He's my neighbor again. He lives in Oakland. Yeah, it's so bizarre. Like, life is a joke. Like, it's so I'd like distanced lunch with him a couple of weeks back, where we sat in a park 10 feet from each other and talked about how weird it is. And then, yeah, just other people, like Lucy had, I think by then she had come down to the London to do an internship with GameSpot UK, I think. And I interviewed her in a video I did on GameSpot about like mental health in games before she was, there. And I don't know, man, it was just like the same as anything. There was enough people there. You know, now it's like, you know, the 2 or 3 people who sort of got in are the ones that we talk about. But there was loads more of us who didn't, right? Folks who I still keep in contact with, and some I don't, who found other passions, or, you know, it wasn't for them, or went home or did something else.
You seem to come into like GameSpot when they really first started doing kind of personality focused video stuff, the stuff that like Jeff and that crew left to do Giant Bomb, and they were kind of like catching up on that side. How did you feel like you had quite a lot of control to shape that type of content? Because I remember your stuff we've spoke about this before as well, very Charlie Brooker inspired, very opinion show based stuff. Like, did you feel like there was a really good creative time there where you could just kind of do what you want because no one had really set the rules for how personality video content was to go?
Not just at GameSpot, but really at GameSpot UK, because we were such a smaller outfit, and we are kind of stuck in this proxy war, like as individual, people who worked there, employees basically, where there was kind of 2 little proxy wars going on. There was kind of a war between the UK and the US a little bit, or like the UK side was really trying to prove itself, right? Because the thing about like satellite offices, as you probably know, is that they're always kind of worried about getting cut. You know, you're always worried that someone on a line item in the main office will go snip, and then suddenly 8 people lose their jobs, right? So you're really hustling. And we had a video boss there who's now the video lead here in the US, who was really good at empowering us to make good stuff. And then also, I think there was a bit of a proxy war within GameSpot UK between the editorial department and the video department, right? Whereas video was always like a sort of a support team almost for editorial, you know, where you'd had an editor doing a review, the video team would make the video review, shoot it and edit it, but they wouldn't write it, right, you know? So they hired, there was a couple of people who were there before me, Johnny Chiodini, who just launched his own Patreon a few days ago, Seb Ford, who runs a Double Jump, which is a production company now in London, and his cohort, Cam Robinson, fellow Scot, him and me were hired on the same day, and basically the sort of group of us were essentially like hired as video producers who could also write, which was not really a job that existed much in the games press before, because, you know, video people were basically like IT people for cameras, right? Or for editing. So I think that's where it came into it. Whereas like we were given a voice, right? And we were encouraged to make more editorial focused stuff that we wouldn't need the writing team for. And I think he also hired people who were confident in front of camera or had something to say, because sometimes, you know, a lot of editors are hired to do like incredibly difficult work of writing, and they might not necessarily be the type of people who want to be in front of camera. It's not like a one-to-one, right? So I think because of that, we ended up feeding off of each other, and there was maybe a bit of competitiveness. I don't know if it was competitiveness. I think it might have been just like support between the different video producers, and we all got better in such a small period of time. Like I'd never edited much at all. I'd never used like a proper cine camera like that. So I was really lucky to be thrown in with a bunch of very giving and cool and talented video people. And then also like the best thing ever was that once you got this video, you put it up and it went on like the front page of like the biggest video game website in the world, or like on any given month it was IGN and GameSpot basically, which was insane. And with that power, of course, I wanted to make the weirdest shit possible, because like how weird would it be to like do a video on, I think the first one I did was a history of Deus Ex, just for shits and giggles, and just weird videos on like, which now is like so boilerplate, but the idea of doing a video on like a 15-year-old game and putting it on the front page of a website then was just like, what are you doing? What a waste of time. I want to hear about the latest FIFA or Madden or Call of Duty. So it was just like, it was such a fun time to be really weird and wacky with the type of videos that we did. And the cameras we had were really good, and it was just like no holds barred. Yeah, so it was a great time to be there.
I think that was like a really exciting era to be watching games coverage as well, because the typical review preview cycle was getting really, really dull. So to see all these people that were like just like you, like there was like an aspirational level, because it wasn't TV production, it was like that level between YouTube and TV kind of. So it felt like, at least to me watching stuff like that, it's like, okay, that's the goal, that's the role. I suppose the same way that when you were like writing into On the Spot, and then suddenly you're like on the Giant Bomb couch on Unprofessional Fridays. Like I think about that and I'm just like, this industry's so weird. You're only ever like 2 steps away from the people that inspired you to get into the industry.
And I wish like I lived the other reality of this for because I was trying to break into the industry for like, it was 7 or 8 years maybe, and by the end, right, or like 6 or 7 maybe. But I was like, I came in with actually like kind of a bit of a chip on my shoulder, because like a lot of folks got in their early 20s or something, and I was trickling up into my late 20s before, I think I was 20, like late 20s, like 27 probably, right, before I got in, or maybe a little bit younger now, which is nonsense, right, because I've now been in the industry for like, it'll be 10 years in a couple of years, so I'm old hat at this stage. I had a lot of frustration and, you know, I don't know, bitterness, but just drive, like to the point of the detriment of lots of other parts of my life. Like I think I didn't find time for myself until getting married and having a kid. And like, even now I'm still, you know, I always talk about this with people where it's, you know, I'm really lucky to be in this position, but I also like did it at a fairly high detriment. Like it's all I cared about day in, day out for years and years and years and years. And I think I wouldn't recommend people necessarily do that either, because I'm also one of the few people I feel are very lucky people who were in this position who's still in it, because this industry does tend to like, even like once you get in, like the as you know, like the entry plan to get in is really important, but what's almost as important is the exit plan, to be able to like find a way to get out before the big corporation you eventually end up working for chews you up and spits you out, you know, which I've seen to happen to so many of contemporaries who are far more talented or far more experienced than I do. So
you just need one of those Andy McNamara roles where you're in the same job from like 1991 until you're eventually like, okay, now I'll go and do EA. Like,
I'll get into consulting now.
Yeah, exactly. Get all that Patreon money, hit the withdraw button, and then just be like, okay, this happened quicker than we thought. Let's
See,
boost.
it's fun. Yeah, see, like for me, it's like the drive has always been, I lived paycheck to paycheck for most of my life. The years in London especially were hard because there was some pretty rough times back then, but like, I definitely don't have the financial anxiety I did for a large part of my adult life. But the reason I do this isn't that, and the reason I would like progress what we do at Noclip isn't that. It's that I think now, especially after 4.5 years of doing this, I was expecting loads of people I was like, oh, we're going to be the first through the wall. GameSpot and IGN and all these other places will basically follow us. We'll have other YouTube creators doing it. And there have been some. I'm not saying that we're the first people ever to document video games or anything like that. Of course not. But like, there's a certain ethos or style that we use that is kind of different and new and fresh. And I expected more people to be doing it by now, and they're not. And it's because this stuff is really difficult to make. It's like mentally taxing. It's hard to get the access, and it's expensive. And I think if the triangle of that is hard for any one person to get. And now it's kind of like, oh, maybe I'm like just really lucky to be one of the few people who can do this. So we have to keep doing this, and we have to like see how far we can grow it, and where does it get too much, and where is the sweet spot. So for me now, it's not really about like, I don't want to settle into my old, I'm not saying Andy McNamara did now, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to settle into a role and do this. Like I want to, the reason now it feels like basically I found myself on a bit of a rocket ship, and I want to like see how far into space we can go.
Do you still read or watch much game coverage these days, or is it just not your thing?
I do. I don't as much as I did when I was in the press, because when we were... and weirdly enough, now that I've been sort of doing a bit of fill-in work on Giant Bomb's podcast again, I'm actually doing more of that now than I was before. And it's because like the I guess view cone that I have now needs to be a bit more moment to moment and contemporary. Whereas when we were doing documentaries on Noclip, they tend to be about games that have been out for a year or maybe more. So I wasn't so in the mix, but yeah, I totally do. I probably read a lot less than I used to now. I watch more video than I do, but that has more to do with my inability to read well than anything else. I have a bit of an OCD kind of nature to me, so I find it hard to read a lot of stuff, especially on screens. Magazines were always my thing.
Have you checked out any, like, because there's been a bit of a Kickstarter revival of people doing magazines. There's like a really good Nintendo Switch
have
one.
Most of them been in the UK? Because to me, like magazines, like over here they talk about EGM and GamePro and all these types of things, but like, at home I have like racks and racks of PC Gamer. I remember Brooker and PC Zone. Like, yeah. Between Edge and like, there's literally a stack of
the modern Edges right there. Right. Like every month it drops through, and I sit and read it, and I look at all the art, and I'm just like, there's just something more satisfying to this than just clicking publish on an article. Like I really like the like just holding something and being like, this. There was a lot of work putting into this.
And it was also like back in the day before everyone was on the internet and before there was a lot of coverage of games, this day-to-day coverage of games, it was like your monthly update on what's going on with games. You went down, I went down to the local bookshop in my hometown, and it was the one connection I had to the games industry was this magazine that would come in, once a month. So I'm not surprised there's a revival in the UK, because to me, the heart and soul of games writing, especially when it comes to magazine type stuff, is in Britain. And like you see it here with like the amount of writers that ended up coming over here to work in the written press, especially, folks like Gary Whitta and even like the amount of US journalists who would have op-eds in Edge, because of course they would, because where else would what US magazine would post, like back in the day. Like I used to read N Guy Crowell in the back of Edge. It's like, it's incredible. Like, yeah, I'm delighted to hear that. There's an important sort of history there.
Yeah, it's nice to see. It's kind of a weird industry over here right now, where it's like there's still at the top of the tree, you still have like your IGN UKs and your Eurogamers, like the kind of Future and ReadPop, like big corporation websites, and they seem to be doing pretty well. But there's also like a really strong kind of independent undercurrent where people are just like, it probably shouldn't be two companies that control all of the media, all of the games media in the UK. So that's kind of like, that was certainly our attitude, because I mean, it's not as if we come from a hugely independent background. Like, my day job is the BBC, it is literally the establishment. But it was just that feeling of it felt like there needed to be some kind of sea change, because it doesn't feel like there's really been one since the leap to personality based video. Like, that feels like the last huge moment where everything changed and everyone had to adapt, and it feels like something like that's coming again. And if I knew the answer, I would have $1 billion. But what do you think what do you think the next move is? What's the next move? Give me a business plan here, Danny.
Well, like, I guess I talked about the problem that there was with Patreon, right? Which is that as much as it works for folks like me or Noclip, which Noclip has a sort of inherent feeling of games preservation to it or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we're not a charity. Like, people often ask if we have tried to, go down that road, and like, I guess we maybe could as well. Maybe we'd pay less taxes or something, but like, at the end of the day, we're a video production company, or, we don't do any contract work, but like, we're a company, America, you got to be a company. Everyone here is a company. The problem, of course, is that it's difficult to drive viewership, right? So or patronage rather. So it's weird. I think YouTube still has the power to drive audiences, but I think on the issue where it gets messy, and I think where YouTube kind of falls short, is that it's difficult, I think, to build local audiences sometimes, and I think the UK is more used to that type of local market than the US is, and that's where a lot of the tech comes out of, right? So like, your Scottish audience is going to be different to the north of England, to London audience, to the east, to the Welsh, to Ireland, to Northern Ireland. We all have our own sort of like little pocket, right? And some of that stuff becomes universal, like Pennsylvania obviously is the one that comes to mind for a lot of like non-Scottish video game lovers, right? Like that type of thing that bursts through. But when it comes to Patreon and when it comes to crowdfunding small little enterprises or magazines or zines or small local newspapers, YouTube doesn't really have the mechanisms for that, for getting it in front of the right people. So I don't know, because what it does is it forces sort of like smaller British-based organizations or news organizations to sort of play the national game or the international game, and that is inherently less interesting. The thing that's interesting about that type of reporting is that it's small and it's local and it's for a small community. And within games, that works around certain games because you create communities around, Roller Coaster Tycoon or Dishonored or Call of Duty or FIFA or whatever it is. The smallness and the community feeling of it comes from the topic, not from anything to do with locality. And Noclip falls into this a little bit too, right? Video producers who like video games, it's already a little bit siloed. So it's difficult to give to have the perspective be the thing that's local. So I wish I had an answer, but I really don't.
Gonna have to put some effort into this now. It's so disappointing. I just assumed that I would come on here and you'd be like, right, here's how you do it. 3-hour-long Let's Plays, that's it. The watch time will be astronomical and you'll be fine. Before I let you go to play with your fancy new camera that has been looming over your shoulder this entire time.
Costs more than my car.
I think it's more money than I've seen in my entire life just sitting behind you. It's very jealous. Do you ever...
Insured now, thankfully.
Does stuff like when you get stuff like that in, do you ever have that moment of just like, this costs an astronomical amount of money?
Yes, but not with money, with access.
Oh,
with the stuff that sits on my hard drive. Like this time last year we showed gameplay of an unreleased Half-Life game that like nobody really knew about as well. Like, it was so unreleased and so unknown that people didn't really knew that even the game existed. Like, nothing had been out. And then we put up like, we did an hour and a half long video about Arcane. And then in that, because that's the thing as well, we're assholes. We could have made like a 20-minute video. Here's Half-Life Ravenholm with like a Half-Life Ravenholm thumbnail. But we're like, no, we're going to make you watch a fucking 90-minute documentary about Arx Fatalis and Dark Messiah Mountain Magic before we get to that. That type of thing where suddenly, I have a hard drive in my hand that has this thing that like we got, no one else got before us. And I don't know who would get it after it, because the people who are working on this game are slowly leaving the company over years, right? Like, when is this story ever going to get told again, right? So that type of thing. That's when I go, holy shit. And to be honest, like, our hard drives are still full of more stuff, because we have to, sometimes when it comes to that, we have to like, there's a bit of like compromise that goes on there, So I feel like eventually there'll be like a dead drop or something when I die, my heart stops beating, it'll like upload all of the nonsense that we've accrued over the years that we haven't been able to show to the cloud. I don't know, something like that.
Well, before I let you go, Danny, do you want to plug everything that you're doing right now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Jordan. I really appreciate the time.
No, anytime. Talking about Citizen Game, I mean, come on. Where else are you going to have this conversation?
Us .co.uk's have to stick together, you know what I mean?
Citizen Game is available. It's £180, but citizengame.co.uk is available, so...
I let it lapse about... I think it was a year or two ago. The site ran for years after I left. I handed the keys over to some very talented people, and they kept it going. And I used to check in on what they did. But yeah, sadly, the thing about web developers is eventually you just have to not renew the domain, because then you just have these like 60 domains that follow you throughout life. Yeah, you can catch all our stuff on YouTube, youtube.com/noclipvideo. We have documentaries on probably a game you like by this stage. It's been 4.5 years.
If you're watching this, there is about 10 documentaries about games that you're like intimately familiar with.
What were some of your ones? You tell them what ones they should watch.
So the Doom one, it was your second one, but it's an all-timer for me. The Final Fantasy one is the only thing that frustrates me about the Final Fantasy one is sometimes I like to loop them in another tab, like ones I've already watched as a podcast. But obviously Final Fantasy is like almost entirely subbed.
A lot of Japanese.
That was one where I was like, how did you even get into Square? That is very, very impressive. And also Hades developing Hell. That would be the one that when you're actually fully done, people would still be like, here, that Hades documentary. You got very lucky on that it happened to be like a 10 out of 10 game.
It was so right. We could not believe. The last 2 episodes, you should have seen the temp script that I had for some of that stuff. We're like, how are we going to finish this arc on this 6-part series? And we had this whole idea. And then episode 5, of course, was all about the pandemic, because that just came out of fucking nowhere. And then episode 6, it was, oh wait, this game got Game of the Year on IGN. This game sold who knows how many? Like, insane. Yeah, so we've loads of stuff, and it's all ad free, and you can go watch it on YouTube. And yeah, it's hopefully there's something you can enjoy and get to know game developers a little bit better, maybe create some empathy between gamers and devs. That's kind of the hope.
It's a noble ambition.
Well,
thanks, Danny.
Yeah, we'll have to or keep work. There's work still left to do, Jordan. Work still left to do.
Support for Overlode is provided by our incredible patrons. To support us and receive access to perks and exclusives such as Patreon-only video series, check out patreon.com/overload or click the link in the description. Thank you.